Hi friend, I'm Nancy Lee, co-director at Tatamagouche Centre. Welcome to this walking audio tour, our people, past and places. Part of moving forward together in a good way is knowing our past, speaking our truth. We're going to invite you on a little walk around the land with several dear friends to guide you. We recommend you begin in the morning at first light. Begin anywhere on the property that resonates and walk toward the water. Look out to the waters. Tatamagouche in Mi'kmaq is Tatamagouche, meaning where the sandbar meets the river. Have a look. Depending on the tide, you'll see the sandbar where it meets first the French River and later the Oise. This was a sacred Mi'kmaq gathering place for thousands of years before contact. We'll start with the knowing words of Kathy Martin, who has both ancestral and family ties to this place, dear friend of the center, award-winning filmmaker, artist, organizer. She's a clan mother who helps to lead our peace and friendship work and is also one of the chairs of Wabanaki West Squawk, Women of First Light, a collective of clan mothers from across Wabanaki. She starts by grounding us in our most elemental guide, the land itself and all its creatures.
Midawaloktiok, Nin Gadlanan Multi, Weligiskuk. My name's Catherine Martin, and I'm a member of the Millbrook Mi'kmaq community, and Tatamagouche has been, for me, a beautiful place in my life to go to for all kinds of reasons. But historically and ancestrally, my great-grandparents used this area. It's like their hunting district. We have 7 hunting districts within the Mi'kmaq, within our nation. And they span from Newfoundland to Maine over to Quebec and all of the land in between. And the territory includes this beautiful district. And this district is the one that my family, who lived in Truro, used a lot of the land within 100 kilometers of where they lived. So this is their trapline area, or their hunting and district area for the Copes, Joe and Sarah Cope and their ancestors, and for John Martin, my great-grandfather, and my grandfather Mike Martin, and of course my dad and my uncles and my grandmother, and then my own brothers and now my nephews still continue to use this land to hunt, to fish, and to trap. Tatamagouche has everything you need to survive. It's an obvious place for our ancestors and for us today to continue to go to, for picking sweetgrass, for fishing, for hunting, for berry picking, for medicines. Tatamagouche has it all. And it also has this history that is undeniable when you're there and you know that this is a sacred land. There is a very small area along the shore where there is our burial grounds, our sacred ancient burial grounds. So not only is this very special to me as a member of the Martin and Cope family, it's also a place where our ancestors chose to lay their people, their loved ones, to rest. And these are old. These are marked with rocks, little stones. It's also a place where we would have lived in the summertime because it's a very warm water because of the Northumberland Strait and the Gulf Stream. It moves in and out of there. We see another hunting district from the shores of Tatamagouche Centre, and that is what they call PEI today, or Abegwit. And we can see Abegwit, one of our districts, from across this bay, and people crossed from that territory to this one all the time. I remember being driven down there in my granddad's old white station wagon, Mike Martin, and he wanted to take us out for a picnic. So we went and we parked along the shoreline, and he went in and we all ran in and we picked quahawks and dug clams, and then he just filled it with ocean water and threw it on top of a fire and steamed the clams. That was our picnic. And here we, as younger kids, were used to like the picnic basket with, the potato salad and all that, but never what is truly a beautiful way to just survive and live and enjoy. And that's what we did. And I'll never forget that time. And so in the summertime, there's no doubt this was a gathering place.
Next, we turn to the words of Tatamagouche, Wampano grandfather, spirit and thought leader, early founder of our peace and friendship work, the Neighbors Project to build friendship and solidarity, including the fishing treaty rights in Esconobidich Burnt Church.
Tanichka nitomp. Nutabadantamongashka no hachio no wanap komiog. Kushkimo nacho piantamwe pitakuyogash. Yuna pishanoe no koshamas kichikuas. Manitomp wacho nashno pasukong na yoje. My name is Tatamagouche. Wacho in keke tanzionka. Mashipi otan Wabanisunu Kwato Timunog. I come from a community called Mashpee, located in a Wampanoag region called Nauset, renamed by Samuel Champlain as Cape Cod. 37 years ago, I married into the community of Esconobidich, Migamagig, which is part of this land here, this area in Tatamagouche. I come to this place with a great deal of respect and love and gratitude. I've been asked to participate in many different levels, often taken leadership in some of the programs here. I remember fondly of attempting to explain treaties. I also had a prominent role in bringing ceremonies to this in the style that I'm accustomed to, which is a kind of awakening for participants, because our ceremonies, our greeting the day ceremonies, begins about an hour before the sun rises, so it's still dark, very cold, mysterious kind of thing. That is an effort for people to participate in a way that's a natural event. And that natural event is to actually see the first light coming to us. So in my part of the forest, if you will, Wampanoag, the term Wampanoag is referring to people of that first light. And so it becomes both a collective but an individual responsibility to greet that first light, thereby maintaining the continuity of all those multiple generations that preceded us and making a pathway to those multiple generations yet to come.
In 1725, peace and friendship treaties between the British Crown and Wabanaki nations did not surrender or cede land, but formed the basis of ongoing relations of peace and friendship. This land is still unceded and unsurrendered. Grandfather and elder Daniel Paul of Wabanaki recounts the violence of settler colonization, the erroneous doctrine of discovery, in his recently re-released book, We Were Not the Savages. He shared the orders of Mi'kmaq genocide in the provincial government chambers not long after in 1744, including bounties of between 50 and 100 pounds to kill Indigenous men, women, and children. It's not hard to imagine why generations of Elnu people in Wabanaki are still healing and reeling from intergenerational trauma. In spite of their incredible resilience and dignity, too many lives have been lost, and the genocide continues. We're still reconciling, repairing, and righting relations. The United Church of Canada held 15 residential schools at its height. They were one of the first churches to apologize in 1986 for colonization, and then later in the mid-90s for the role in residential schools. They began work of reparations, including funding to support residential school survivors. We've been on a long road of friendship and work toward our treaty responsibilities. So ask yourself, how can you truly be a friend at this time and take responsibility on this unceded land? Walk toward the water and toward the big white house, Campbell House. Close to a decade later, in 1755, the Acadians would be dispossessed on the same land. Known as the expulsion of the Acadiens, French Roman Catholic families of the area would be forced by the British to leave the province. As Patterson recounted in 1947, nothing but smoke, embers, and ashes remained of the Acadian village of Tatamagouche. Now we'll hear again from clan mother Kathy Martin.
We helped Acadians during the expulsion and before the expulsion. We helped them to learn how to live on our land, and they found lands that were similar to theirs, and Tatamagouche area, as you know, was one of them. And so I think we need to remember that back in the 1700s, we helped the Acadian to hide from the British and their massacring. And we helped them to hide amongst us. We took people in, and we also helped them leave and go off to places that were safe for them. That's an old story, and that should be told about what we did in that area. Why were those people there, and why did we help them? We helped them.
This land was given to Colonel Des Barres as part of a 20,000-acre land grant by the British Crown to settle Protestants in the area. In 1771, several tenant farmers came from Montbéliard region of now France via Lunenburg, having fled their own persecution for being Protestant. Descendants of these families remain in the area. Burial remains can be found in the cemetery just north of the center on the Butter Trail. As we walk toward Campbell House, the oldest house in resettled Tatamagouche, it's critical that we own and acknowledge this history. Only then is there a chance for collective healing. As we arrive at Campbell House, we move another 50 years. This house is named after Alexander Campbell, a Scottish boat-building captain who built it in 1824. Steam would gradually lead to wooden ship demise, but at the time this was a bustling site of shipbuilding. Next is the voice of Helene Hanna, recounting how the United Church of Canada came to purchase and still owns this land. Helene was an early United Church educator, program director, and feminist, one of the founding visionaries of Tatamagouche Centre.
In the early 50s, John Stewart was driving around Nova Scotia looking for a suitable location for a Centre of Christian Studies for Atlantic Canada, a place for young adults to live and learn to apply the Christian faith towards building a world of peace that would, in future, overcome atrocities as in World War II. He was passing through Tatamagouche, until he had a flat tire. Conversation from the garageman led John, most unexpectedly, to this precious place where breathes the mystery. There 2 rivers meet and flow into the bay, the French and the Oise rivers, together verbal reminders of occupants of Acadian and Scottish descent as they pick up stories of the Aboriginal. The Aboriginal left buried there in the soil fragments of their lives on this land that some call magical. For me, it is truly a place of the spirit of all creation. The mists from the water, the salt mists, seem to be life-giving to the land and to those of us who were practicing there. And each person who came had some notion of that.
The center was created by 12 people who each contributed $1,000. Those were the beautiful beginnings of community organizing and collective care that formed our origins. Then, named the Atlantic Christian Training Center, it was created to be a training place for ministers and lay leaders, members of community, grounded in spirit, mind, and body. Deeply engaged in community and committed to justice. A spirit of transforming love in the world, influenced by many movements of the time, including feminism, liberation theology, environmental movements, those that combined a spiritual and justice orientation. The Antigonish movement right nearby, the Iona community in Scotland, Highlander and civil rights in the U.S., and Kirkridge, Pennsylvania, to name a few. Next, we'll walk behind Campbell House and stand in the sacred grove of oak, linden, and black locust trees. These were planted under the early leadership of Helene Hanna. This is where friends gather in peace and friendship around wigwam, where sacred fires are held and stories shared. The dear late Wilf Bean, who we'll hear from shortly, and his wife Catherine Anderson, have been part of the movement of people, Mi'kmaq water protectors, grandmothers, settlers, Guatemalan friends and activists, who work to protect land, waters, and human rights. They remind us of the harm done to the non-human species of the rivers and marsh here, the polluted watershed. We can't drink the water, and we can no longer eat of its gifts. Many of the species named here in the 1700s are now extinct or threatened. But collectives like SUNY and the Mi'kmaq water protectors and grandmothers continue to work for the water's protection. We'll now hear from the dear late Wilf Bean, leader, director, adult educator, and longtime activist who so embodied the values for spirit and community over decades at the center.
I'm Wilf Bean, and first came here because it's an alternative kind of place. It combines, to me, a really good adult education practice, along with a philosophy and a vision of social change, and just a kind of an integrity that really attracted me. One of the areas that really attracts me is just outside under the trees. I think the trees are part of what draws me here. They have a life that's longer than many of us, some of the big trees down in front of Campbell House, and a sense of their rootedness, and a sense that we are part of life that goes beyond just human life, but we're part of a whole network of beings. So we are part of all life that has existed for over 14 billion years, and we are one form of life amongst many, and need to honor that. I think over the years we've gained quite a bit in terms of our relationship with Indigenous peoples and with other peoples who do have an understanding of collectivity in ways that my culture doesn't. I was raised much more in a kind of individualistic kind of understanding, and I think that's been a really important part of my learning, because I came out of a kind of an academic tradition that assumes that the person at the front of the room is the one who knows, and the people who are sitting in chairs are the ones that are here to learn. The Tatamagouche model is a very different model, that we are all learning. We all have life experience that is valuable. So that's been important, and I think it's changed my way in the world to a certain extent. As a privileged white man, I realized that I have only one perspective in the world, and it shouldn't be the dominant one. We are because we are collectively. Our own individuality is part of us being together. Sacredness is part of what happens in a place as much as the place itself for me, and I think it happens all over here.
Stepping inside Campbell House, we return to the words of Gisatanamuk.
There are several learning moments for me personally. The one that I reflect on is that this space, Tatamagouche Centre, and particularly this space called Campbell House. We had a Mi'kmaq youth gathering here one time, and Campbell House is noted for the metaphysical activity, the paraphenomena activity that goes here, very highly charged event, and people consistently speak of this. In this particular event, the boys were here in Campbell House, and the co-facilitator and I were approached by some of the boys who were saying that they're really uncomfortable and they're kind of frightened about what they're sensing here and what they're experiencing here, and asked us to come and do a ceremony. And of course, I think their idea was for us to do an exorcism of some sort, kind of thing, is what they might have been thinking of. And so my friend and co-facilitator Ron and I decided we'll do a ceremony for sure. But instead of exorcising the place, what we chose to do was to welcome the activity here. And we did a ceremony for that, a welcoming ceremony. And we explained that to the young people, that there is burials on this property, and that they come here to participate with us, and that we welcomed them to come here, and that these are your ancestors as well as our ancestors, so we're here to experience this together. Frankly, I didn't have any problem after that kind of thing, but it was a way to express a commitment to the Tatamagouche community, a way to express the key elements of the land that opened for us to have these experiences, and to those who are beyond our experiences, to also connect with them and to connect with and welcome them as we are welcomed here too, you know. And it's experiences like that that cumulatively makes it feel like home.
Many who have come here feel the presence of ghosts and spirits. Do you? Many have gathered here, sat around the fireplace, wept, danced, and sang, told stories. Let's walk now to Stewart Hall, the main building, the site of gathering, ceremony, and shared learning. Built in 1958, it's named after the first principal, Reverend John Stewart. As we enter, we return to the words of Helene Hanna.
These memories return as I scroll my virtual way through Stewart House. There, the walls of the training rooms confidentially hold stories of struggles, successes, expressions of sorrow and joy of those working in schools, churches, social work, community, family life. You will see the accommodating tools of easels, newsprint, markers, cushions, symbolizing a life of the center strewn, interwoven with the life in the world of mystery, all by ordinary people. I've been thinking about going to a variety of rooms in the center. I think of the people in those rooms as I move from space to space. First entering in the office, the building, Stewart Hall, sat Louise Andrew behind the reception desk. So I move on into the hall, and there we met many, many times in the big room. And this was the years of human relations training. Such wonderful things happened in those rooms where people came with what they had and they offered what they had. And somehow in the mystery of the place, they seemed to be able to bring themselves there and express themselves.
Now winding left and downstairs to the dining room on the first floor, we'll hear from the dear late Father Kenley McNeil. Father Kenley McNeil was a minister, an activist, passionate advocate, leader and supporter of the center. In addition to the many leadership roles over the years, Kenley almost single-handedly saved the center at one point in the history when the center had to close. He came here as a young man for a youth leadership program for the United Church and wonderfully met his wife Dorothy here. Kenley and Dorothy set up an endowment fund for programs, and their daughter Karen would go on to become a minister herself and serve on the board for the Tatamagouche Centre. Find a seat and look out over the beautiful grounds and waters.
I'm Kenley McNeil. Grew up in this area across the water in Malagash, Nova Scotia, on a farm. At the age of 18, I got a job at the bank in Tatamagouche. And I had that job for a year. When I say I didn't go to the centre came to me because it moved into Tatamagouche that year. And my story with the centre would begin there. June or July of 55, they were looking for volunteers to go help them clean up this building here. And while here I talked to the principal about the first event that was coming, because he told me it was a YPU event, which was young people, age 18 through to 30, which was my age, and inquired if I could come to it as well, because it was a leadership training event for their national meeting. I had decided to be part of the church, not to be clergy, to be part of the leadership of the lay church, the church organization. And I felt that I needed to be prepared to do that work. And I figured the winter course would give me a starting of doing that. The value of the course for me was I had an opportunity to ask questions, make statements, and otherwise make comment on other statements, and they were all acceptable. There was nothing that would be called wrong. And the other was I met people, not just the ones that were here, but people came here to offer courses. We went to other events from here to advertise the centre. Met people in other parts of the church. Got to meet other people who were also active in the church in my age group, which even then was not the normal thing for that age group. I mean, that was in the 50s.
Now we'll move back upstairs into the training room where so much magic has happened over the years. Helene Hanna founded the adult learning model and community process that now forms the basis of the center's learning and organizing, based on creating powerful circles of trust and belonging. Drawing on the wisdom in the group, it is now known as Aspire.
Basically, programs of three foci were developed with the intent to help us live out our personal faith as fully as possible in the world, wherever we happen to be. Personal growth aimed toward building individual self-confidence. Group life assumed that confidence and developed skills to promote communications with individuals and groups where they could mutually agree to resolutions to situations. The intent was to enhance understanding and ensuing action toward more cohesive group life.
Now we'll hear from Mohammed Yafa, one of the current program leaders for Aspire in the current iteration of Helene's model of education. An imam, a facilitator, one of the members of the Black Leadership Advisory Council, Mohammed continues to lend his leadership to the center, and for that we're grateful.
My name is Mohammed Yafa. I live in Halifax. I've been in Nova Scotia for 20 years. My first coming to the Tatamagouche Centre was for some expansion of my capacity in adult education, and that was in 2002. I did the adult education design, which is now Aspire, and I was extended the opportunity of doing a second level, and then the opportunity of being a member of the program resource group. We decided, myself and a few other people, to initiate a program which was a Black leadership program for Black youth. And we invited a number of youths, got some funding and brought them here and talked about racism, living in Halifax, living in North America, and empowerment and leadership. Since then, we have seen many people from the Black community come to the center here, participate in its programs, led programs here, support the center. The other thing that I've been involved in this center was the Aspire program, which I have led a couple of times now. The Aspire program is one of its kind because of the way it takes you from just willingness into transformation. And its focus on shared leadership and how to be a leader without necessarily being the one who's always in the forefront, how to be in the background and actually support people, which is a model for helping communities. Just questioning them so that they as adults can come out with what they have and they can see their potential and they can see the answers within them. And it's very personalized to them. It has this component of reflection on what you've experienced. So an experience and reflecting over it so that the learning will be entrenched and deepened. So the flexibility of Aspire has allowed us to do some changes in it. For example, there's a lot of focus now on trauma-informed approach within Aspire and the diversity of the people who are receiving Aspire. There is focus on conflict management because Aspire used to be a program that was designed in a way that would suit certain people but not others. So many times there has been very heightened emotional moments for people and not everybody is comfortable with that. So I personally was honored by being with certain group of people to look at Aspire and see how can we make it so that it is not centered the way it was done before. It was not completely Eurocentric because many people come to it with other backgrounds.
As we work to ensure that our learning and programming really embodies our values of anti-racism and anti-oppression, we acknowledge the harm that has occurred at the center over the years and the collective healing that continues. We're committed to righting our relations with each other, with ourselves, with the land. Now let's hear again from Kathy Martin.
Here in the East, we are the gatekeepers. We are the Eastern Door. That's who we are as the Wabanaki. And as gatekeepers, it's our role to let the spirit in, let everything come through the East so it goes on through to the West. And the gatekeepers and the Eastern Door was closed for many years because of all of the damage that's being done and the disconnect, the impact of colonization and Christianity. Our ceremonies, our ancient knowledge was being restricted on us. So the Eastern Door, because of our memory of our sacred traditions, was getting lost, although there's people that remember it. And through ceremony, we're bringing back what we need to do in Tatamagouche, which teaches us what else we need to do in the rest of Mi'kmaq, in the rest of the earth. We've been bringing elders and teachers and pipe carriers and healers and gatherings and gatherings and gatherings and inviting the non-Indigenous people to come through our peace and friendship gatherings, that everybody comes in and learns about our ways. It's almost like an immersion for 4 days of ceremony and learning about how we live. And that means you come together, you feed the people, you feed the people, you feed the people, and you make sure they are happy and comfortable so they can have their conversations and they can give us some guidance and tell us what's going on in the community, who's doing what and what needs to be helped. Just like when we met as 7 hunting districts, we would come together and say where we shouldn't hunt or pick berries or leave this area for this year so that it can regenerate, and we would talk about where else we should all go and not go. And in those gatherings we would celebrate births and deaths and weddings and coming of ages, all this things. So that's what we wanted people to understand about our gatherings, and that's been happening little by little by little every time we gather, and each time a group agrees from our communities to come and do something at the Center, that's another step towards the healing of the land, which then in turn heals the people. And the connection to the land is what keeps us moving. It keeps us being who we are.
Walk toward the painting at the side of the wall in the training room. We will next hear from Catherine Anderson, another Tatamagouche Centre leader, diaconal minister of the United Church of Canada, and tireless activist, locally and working in a Guatemala Maritime Solidarity Network to protect land, waters, human rights.
When I came to Tatamagouche Centre in the fall of 1988, I came from Montreal, where I had been deeply, deeply involved in Guatemala solidarity work with Guatemalan refugees living in Montreal. And I had connections with people in the Maritimes who were also working on Guatemala solidarity. And so when I came to the center, we talked in the program committee about starting to develop relationships with United Church and Oxfam partners in Guatemala. And we did that with the understanding that we would want to have visitors here each year who we would learn from, and that we would also take delegations to Guatemala to learn there from groups that were struggling for human rights in a very dangerous situation. And that is how we began. And over the years, we've gradually grown into a very strong network across the Maritimes and even beyond. A very sacred space is a painting in the training room that was done by an intern. Her name is Catriane McNeil from Sydney, Nova Scotia, and she painted a picture of a woman and children resisting very publicly and with great risk the dictator who oversaw the genocide in Guatemala. And it's very sacred because it both speaks to the suffering and pain of people and also to their resistance and their determination. And we, I think, at Tatamagouche Centre have learned so much from the Guatemalan people about what it means both to encounter suffering that's almost unspeakable and at the same time to know how much resistance and resilience they have. One of my favorite learning moments, there are so many, I mean countless, almost every event has something very special. But I think because I'm particularly talking about the Breaking the Silence Network, I would like to speak about perhaps our very first delegation in 1991, when we went to Guatemala and heard stories from people and realized that no longer was this just going to be about us going and having a one-time learning experience. When you encounter people whose suffering has been so profound and so unjust, it is not possible to walk away. And so for me, I think a transformative time was learning that we would need to take the next steps to maintain a network here and to grow that network and to grow and deepen our understanding of human rights. And I would say from that understanding came also our commitment to ensuring that Indigenous rights in Canada become part of the life of the center. In a way, Guatemala and the Maritimes came together. And so that's been one of the most transformative moments for me. More than a moment, was a whole encounter.
Now we'll walk to the sanctuary space at the end of the hall. You'll find it newly renovated with local oak floors and new windows. We hear from Rena Kolchitsky, Aspire program lead, powerful facilitator across so many programs. Here they recount their experience with Social Justice Youth Camp and some reflections on the center in general. We're grateful for Rena's gifts.
So my name is Rena Kolchitsky. I am a settler here in Mi'kma'ki. I came to the Tatamagouche Centre for the first time as a participant in the training with Planned Parenthood, came as a participant in a hosted program by the Heartwood Centre, came as a facilitator for Social Justice Youth Camp, and then later as a coordinator. Social Justice Youth Camp is a program that hosts young people from across the Atlantic provinces, and some young people come from further away, and they just learn about social justice. There's usually a team of coordinators, and generally would bring together between like 30 and I think up maybe 45 young people together to learn for 5 days at the end of the summer. Over more than a decade, young people from incredibly diverse backgrounds have come together in this place and learned to see and be seen by each other. So young people who've never met a trans person before, young people who've never met a person from a different country who speaks a different language before, people from different religious backgrounds. I remember a moment, young people were gathered in a circle out on the back lawn, and we were doing a sharing about, what had impacted them about camp. And I remember listening to those young people and marveling about how in love with each other they were, how much love had been cultivated. At the time it occurred to me, I was like, wow, okay, so how do we do that? How did that magic happen? How do young people come together and in 5 days go from strangers to really being such incredible impacts and influences in each other's lives? And the room that used to be called the chapel and has at times been called the music room, that also is a room where incredible magic happened during Social Justice Youth Camp. That was always the room that we had our last night talent show or variety show and dance. So what often happened was that meant that our talent show, you would see young people who at the beginning of the week were talking to nobody, performing something for the first time, or having learned a dance from somebody else from a different culture, or young people who had, musical talents who had never met before would write songs together throughout camp. And you would just watch them shine and be cheered on in this last night at camp.
Let's walk outside now and look around the grounds. There are a few spaces we haven't visited. If you look out at the big brown building across through the trees on the left, you'll see Saswasik Lodge, built in the mid-70s. That was a creation of Don Reed, one of the earlier directors. Then there are the Andrew houses, the brick buildings to the far left across from the linden trees. They were built in the mid-50s and later renovated in the 90s. The Andrew houses were named after Louise Andrew, the first program register. She showed the kind of radical hospitality we strive for, always having a space for staff to sleep and meet, a kind word or a smile. And then we have the Creightons, the motel-style units also built in the 50s and renovated in the 90s, and named after one of our early leaders. Finally, if you look out across the road to the older yellow house, that's Stephen's house, second oldest house in Tatamagouche, and generously donated by the lovely Stevens sisters. Stephen's house was built in the 1840s by the son of Alexander Campbell, who had originally built Campbell House.
Stevens house. Two lovely sisters lived there, Boyne and Myrtle Stevens. Gracious, hospitable, grew wonderful geraniums, and generously the house became the centers. Their graciousness seemed to live on in that place.
Now let's take a stroll to the labyrinth. You can see it there across the field. Here we want to introduce Eliza Skirman, Wiccan, artist, early leader and facilitator at the center. Eliza's artwork is found throughout the center. Note the lovely paintings in the common room. One of her beloved creations is the labyrinth. She helped to design it with Creighton Brown. Here you'll also see a tribute to Don McDougall, Shirley Childs, and Kathleen Dunn, whose vision created the Contemplative Pathway program. This partnership was created to deepen our spiritual practices using silent and other retreats. And this very labyrinth, walking with intention and a question that you have in front of you, is one of those spiritual practices.
And spent time in England and in Scotland and in Ireland, and realized that, that the ancient ways of providing a spiritual experience were still viable today. And I know that the Christian church took the labyrinth and it became part of the pilgrimage thing, but the one that's here is the one from France, Chartres Cathedral in France. And it's huge, just like the one in the field here. And it was a place where the pilgrims from the British Isles, when they did pilgrimages, would stop there and walk that. And if there were people who couldn't make it all the way to the Middle East, then they would consider that was completion and would go back home. That reflection at the end when you come out to sit and talk to yourself or talk to someone else is very important, because it integrates what your experience was. And prepare yourself before you go in. That's the original intent, was either of going in with gratitude or with a problem to be solved, or anything that was coming up for you when you sat outside the circle, whatever came up. So anything you were disturbed by or wanted to spend more meditation on, and then walk very closely, paying attention to your breathing and the walking, and just let it happen. Just let it happen.
We'll leave you with a few reflections from our friends. We want to thank all of those interviewed. Catherine Boussier for her beautiful job co-producing this work, and early support from John Hutt and Lee Fleming. Thank you so much for joining us.
The center here, for me, it was a place where I finally started to wake up and be myself and say, I count too. I count as well. And having been brought up in a rural community here in Nova Scotia, without that kind of stimulation, this center was a breath of fresh air. I never had thought about these kinds of things, as we're brought up in, many of us in a religious community where we're told what to believe rather than find out what we believe. And that's, I think, the blessing here is the experiential foundation that this center was based on. Not telling people what to believe, but helping them find it.
I think the center has taught me a change of patience with people that I know that I'll not be able to work with or deal with or really have any agreement with, because they're totally different to me in their own mindset. It's not just that they are physically different or that they are somehow culturally different or taught to be different. It's the fact that they have a mindset that I just do not enter. But I guess it teaches me to be a little bit more patient with that. We also need to know in our time a higher level of diversity. The diversity always was there, but it didn't always meet. But we have that diversity in our midst, and so we need to understand a fair amount of it. So it teaches us to accept before we question, and only question because we don't understand.
I think that when I came, I separated social action from inner spirituality. And I think that in encountering spiritual retreats here that I was a participant in, I began to realize that without an inner sense of hope and strength and inspiration and guidance, that it's very hard to maintain a loving stance in the face of the powers in the world. I think that's one of the biggest transformations, which probably started with the commitment that spirituality was not just individual, but also collective, and that spirituality and justice are very deeply connected, and the internal is very deeply connected with the outer world.
Part of the magic is the fact that Tatamagouche Centre brings together a number of different perspectives. It brings together a profound honoring of the individual and the individual's right to grow and their capacity to be who all we can possibly be, but understands that within a kind of social context, that we are also created by society, and that part of our role is changing society through which we change ourselves, and that kind of interaction.
I think there's just, I guess, spirit in the land that is imbued with all of the incredible change that people have experienced here. So you think about what it feels like in your body and your heart and your soul when you've had incredible aha moments where something shifts inside of you and you see the world differently and you know that you're going to do things differently, that energy radiates in people, and then they walk on the land or they live in these rooms, they have powerful conversations. The magic of this place is those moments that individuals have while they're here.
The center's role in structural change is a huge one, and it has evolved over the years. But I think some of the things that have changed, some of them are the accommodation of different people in this place. So Black people have been here. They have been given the opportunity to hold programs here that empowered them, and that should continue. Muslims have been here, and it has been spiritual for them as well. And I think that role should continue as well. But anti-oppression and anti-racism area, this is the time. In the Islamic tradition, we have a verse that says, God says, just work. You don't have to really see the product of your work right away. Just work. Don't try to be clever. Just be good. That's all that our elders and ancestors have told us, and that's what they've done. That hard work, resilience, and kindness will always, always pay off. And I think that's what we should feed off of. And I think the fact that people put a lot into this place and kept it, and the new generation is trying to keep it sustained, I think we're on that path.
Someone I heard recently say, when asked, what can I do about anti-Black racism? And his reply was, well, what do you do? Do it there. And so what the Tatamagouche Centre does is hosts space and trains people in hosting space and programs in personal and social transformation. So then it has a responsibility to do that with an anti-racist lens, to do that with a social justice lens, to think about equity and how to do that work in a way that uplifts voices that have been diminished, and to create a more just, equitable society so that people leave here with that lens, with an awareness that that is a truth and that they have power and can make those changes.
When we have the time, the right situation, the right people together, then all of that disconnect begins to get reconnected, and this sacred reciprocity is that we need those who are in control right now of the space to give it back in a spiritual way, let go, and start to understand how is it that this land can be returned to the people. Not an ownership, like in the way that the Europeans think of ownership, like you buy it, you pay for it and all that. We don't own land. you share your land. It's ridiculous to think that your mother, the earth, can be bought and sold. That's a foreign concept in our life. And land back in my world is not the same as other people think. The land needs to be brought back to where it needs to continue to do the wonderful things it does, and to bring back the animals, the fish. And when they come back and the rest of us come back, then we'll know we're on our way. And the land needs to hear and feel welcomed and acknowledged and thanked. Every bird, every animal, every plant, every tree, everything needs to be acknowledged every day. We return this land to what it's supposed to be for, the people. All the people, not the Mi'kmaq, all the people. It's a place that we all can enjoy and gather and acknowledge. So that's the part that took the last 30 years in rebuilding a broken relationship. That's been happening little by little by little every time we gather, and I think there's a great opportunity to be a role model, lead, and to show what true reconciliation is.
You know, a lot of us have been thinking about the future of Tatamagouche Centre because Tatamagouche and most of the maritime provinces are situated on unceded territory, which means that when we begin to acknowledge the territory of whatever First Nation, whatever nation is the homeland of, that also is an acknowledgement of responsibility. How this kind of translates to Tatamagouche Centre is that we want to acknowledge, we want to honor what the centre has become over the course of years. You know, this has been a formidable experience of being open, of learning, the depth of that learning, the offer of transition ourselves and our collectivity of Tatamagouche Centre to a higher realm about the nature of love and responsibility. The programming of Tatamagouche Centre often reflects at least the potential of that personal transformation. To me, there is a responsibility to maintain this particular portal of that transformation. Maybe we need to remove these lands out of the economic structures around us so that this becomes a sacred space for everybody and more inclusive of the trees and the life that's around us. There are times when we have the fire outdoors and fox will come and sit with us. You know, very unusual what fox does, but there's that frequency of safety that the fox interprets, you know, the quietness. Part of the linden trees here, they fall over, but you can see that its former life now transforms new life coming from the same shoot. You know, that talks about our ancestral legacy, and that talks about the continuity, that life is connected to what's behind us and connected to what's ahead of us. And we have that special place of honor to be right in the juxtaposition of both. So whatever befalls this space, we want to protect it. And we want to protect it in a way that everyone can benefit, all life can benefit from that. But keeping that opportunity for personal and collective transformation to take place. It's what I think is really not only necessary, but we have to do something like this. We've got to have these spaces of transformation if we really want to be the species that we believe ourselves to be.